don't know why I have such trouble with cotter pins all the time. They aren't that complicated of a thing. Apparently they are, though. Apparently they are. Come on, get out of there, you. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all doing good today. Alright guys, so in today's video I'm going to be taking apart the shifter cover for the 4-speed ratchet top transmission out of the 78 shovel head project that we are currently working on. So I'll be taking apart the ratcheting mechanism, and then I will also be taking out the shifter cam and just double checking the shaft and everything else like that, and I'm hoping everything is good, but I'm not getting my hopes up too high. All right, so the first thing to come off are the 4 screws that hold on the shifter lever, and then the dust cover also. Those are all held on by the same screws, and I've already got them broken loose, so just undo them quickly here. So this should just come off. And it's just held in place with 2 dowel pins, and those dowel pins also hold the dust cover in place. This one is a little bit bent, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue to fix. The dust cover just comes off. All right, so we've got 6 screws holding on the pawl carrier cover. One of these screws is a little bit shorter, and it's held in by a nut on the back side here, while the rest of them just screw right into the cover. Crack that loose, and then the nut just becomes finger tight. All right, now the pawl carrier cover should just come right off. There we go. And there are some springs and stuff in here in the pawl carrier itself, so we're going to want to be careful when we actually take that off and make sure that none of that stuff pops out. And we've got our cover with our gasket on it, so we are going to have to replace the gasket. And now the pawl carrier will just come off of here. It's just held onto the shaft with a bushing, and you just want to be careful that nothing pops out. You don't want the springs all flying around everywhere when you do this. Just work that off of there a little bit. Oh, frick. Just like that. Oh man. Okay, so we'll be looking for some springs now. Shoot. Okay, well here's one of them. Jeez. I didn't think they would pop out that easily, but I was not prepared. I was kind of prepared, but then I was unprepared. Okay. Where did that other spring go? Shoot! I think it's just... Oh no, it's way back there. Dang it. Now I need a flashlight and a clean hand. Okay. Pause the video. Alright, the spring did not go too far away, so that was good. And once you have the pawl carrier cover off, you're going to want to remove your springs. And you just want to make sure that they're not like compressed. You don't want them to be like compromised in any way, so you just want to make sure they're not broken. You want to make sure that they still are good. And these are both, I feel like they're actually pretty new. They've still got a lot of tension left on them, so those are good. They should not have to be replaced. You're also going to want to have a look at the pawls themselves, and these also are held in by a couple springs. So you've got a couple little springs here in the pawls, and you just want to check those. You want to check the ends of the pawls and make sure that they're not rounded off, which these ones look like they're good. They've still got a good sharp edge on them. So those all look good. Also, I'm going to take the pawls out of the carrier. Put those on the tray here. And then you also want to just, while the shaft is still in here, you just want to check the fitment of the bushing in the pawl carrier there. You just want to make sure that it doesn't wobble side to side too much. They don't actually give you a clearance for here, but this one feels good to me. Like, it doesn't have too much movement, and it doesn't look elongated in any way. So I think that bushing should be good. So I'm going to leave that. Put that in the tray. All right, now we just got this one screw holding on the adapter plate. So I'm just gonna undo that. Just take that out with the little washer there. And now the adapter plate should just come off of the cover. It's gonna be a little stuck just because of the gasket. There we go. All right, so now that's all off and it's ready to be cleaned. So I am gonna take my camshaft out, and I do want to take out my shifter shaft also, because I just want to double check the bushings and make sure that they're not too worn, because you don't want any of this stuff to be worn out. It needs to line up properly. This doesn't feel bad, but I'd feel better, I think, if I can actually take a look at it. So the camshaft is held in by a set screw. So I'm just gonna undo that set screw and pull that out. You can see it there, just a little set screw. And then you can just tap your camshaft out, but first you're going to want to take out your neutral light indicator here, which I already have mine loose because I had started taking those apart. And then you also want to take out your cam follower here. This would normally have a lock washer in behind it, or a locking plate in behind it. I've got mine off already because I had started taking this apart, and then I paused it while I took the gear case apart instead. Hopefully the follower comes out with it. There it is, and that's held in by a spring also. It's got a spring in there. So, and that looks like it's in good shape too. Just want to make sure that those are still like got a bit of a peak on them. And then this is my neutral light switch. Right, and you just want to make sure that that presses in and it pops back out freely. You don't want that jamming up, because if it is jamming up, you need to replace your switch. And then once you got those out, then you can take out your camshaft, and these will just tap out. So there's going to be an O-ring on the outside. You want to tap it out going towards the O-ring side. And I'm clamping this in my vise, but I'm making sure to use aluminum jaws too, so I don't wreck anything. You don't want to wreck your aluminum cover. Oh, that's not even tight in there. That's not even very tight at all. Right, so that just pushes right out. And just as I thought, the O-ring on the end of the shaft there, that does need to be replaced. This isn't very rusty, but I'll clean it up a little bit with some emery cloth or something. So that's looking not bad. Now my cam will come right out. Shifter cam. And all this, you just want to check all this out, make sure it's in good shape. And this is in good shape. You want to just check all the teeth on the gear, make sure that those are in good shape. This one tooth has a notch in it, and that will be important when we're reassembling the whole thing. So I'll show you guys that closer when I put the thing back together. And now for my shifter shaft. We've got a cotter pin in there holding the shifter shaft in. So I'm going to pull that out. Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. There we go. Wait, hold on. Is it? Yes, there we go. Okay, cotter pin's out. And now the shifter shaft should be able to just be worked out. Might need to press it out with a screwdriver a little bit. Hopefully it's not too hard of a press. All right, I had to use a little bit of an unconventional method for getting this shifter shaft loose, but it's loose now, so I should just be able to pop it right out. It was definitely a tighter fit than it should be. I can just push the shaft out, there we go. Press the gear into the spring a bit. Slide that out. Use my screwdriver just to help out a bit. Wiggle all that out, there we go. All right, so now that I've got this all apart, I'm just gonna double check my shifter shaft fit in the bushing on the case here. And you just want it to fit in there and just like to spin freely, of course, but not to have a whole bunch of wobble, because this does need to line up. These gears, everything all need to line up nicely for things to be able to shift properly. And this fits pretty nicely. Also, you are going to want to make sure, I'll show you guys this when it all goes back together, but you do have a timing mark on your gear here. your shifter gear that goes on the shaft, it does have a timing mark. Mine is right here, just between these two teeth. And then those are going to align with the gear on the shifter cam. So we'll see all that when this all goes back together. Of course, you're gonna wanna check all your teeth, make sure that none of them are broken or significantly worn. These ones all look like they're in good shape. Well, they're not in perfect shape, but they're in good enough shape to be able to continue to use. Same with the teeth on the shifter gear. These all look like they're in good shape. I'm gonna clean all of this stuff up, of course. My bushings are all in good shape, so that's good. I don't have to replace any of those. I showed you guys my pawls here, and you just want to make sure that those still have nice sharp corners. They're not rounded out at all, so mine are nice. My cam follower, that also is still in good shape. I've seen some guys, they just like to clean these up and shine them up a little bit just to help it so that they follow into that cam a lot nicer. So I'll probably do that too when I clean the whole thing. Also, you want to check all the teeth on your shifter cam also. Make sure none of those are broken or anything like that. And it does have one of the teeth is notched out there. You can see this tooth here has got a little notch in it, and that's going to be your timing mark for when you time that with the shifter gear. We've already checked all this stuff. It's all in good shape. I just need to clean it all now, and then I'm gonna go pick up some gaskets tomorrow. Hopefully they have them in stock and I'll be able to put this all back together. Something else I'm gonna do also that I've seen different people do is before they put the top back on, they just clean up this gasket surface, and you can do it with like a fine file or a stone or something of some sort just to clean up these gasket surfaces. I've also seen them use like a countersink, or like what I'm gonna use is like something just like as a tapering tool or whatever, just to clean up any edges around the holes where the bolts go in. Because if you run your finger along those, you can kind of feel that they just come up a little bit off the surface of the where the gasket would sit. So I'm just going to countersink those like I've seen some guys do, and not much, just enough just to take that little bit of a burr off of those holes, and then that'll just help to get a good seal on there. So now I just gotta clean all this stuff, and then tomorrow after I get my gaskets and all that, I'll be able to put it all back together. Also, I did finally get all the parts for the transmission for the gearbox. They all just came in a couple days ago, so I'm gonna be able to put that back together. It's the weekend, so I gotta wait till tomorrow, Monday, and I'm gonna have to take my fourth gear to a machine shop just to get the bushing inside the fourth gear machined to fit the main shaft, because I had to replace that bushing. So that's something I don't have to do, but that's just an update anyways. All right guys, so I went out and got all the gaskets and stuff I needed for the transmission top, and I'm just ready to put it back together now. So the very first thing to go in is going to be the shifter gear and spring, and then the shifter shaft to follow that. So before I put everything together, I'm just gonna coat all of these steel parts that I've cleaned in just some oil, just to make sure that they don't rust. So the first thing to go in the top is going to be the shifter gear, which is right here, and the shifter gear does have a timing mark on it, and I've actually just indicated it on the ends of the gears here. So my timing mark sits between these two that I've colored yellow here, and that's going to help me just align those timing marks with the shifter cam when I actually have to put that in there, because this also has a gear that's got a little slot in it or a little nick taken out of it, and that you want to be sitting between these two where the timing mark actually lays on the shifter gear. So first things first is I'm going to be putting my shifter gear in the top here, and I'm just gonna put that in there with the spring, and it's going to be kind of tricky because you got to kind of try to compress the spring as you fit it around that bushing, and then it just pops into place. And so once you got that in there, then you're going to make sure that that timing mark is aligned with the very top notch on this gear on the shifter shaft. So it's a square hole, so it's pretty hard to mess that up, because if you put this any way other than the way it should go, it's way out of whack. So the timing mark on the gear here is just going to align with the first slot on the shifter shaft. It's a little tricky with the spring because the spring doesn't really help keep everything straight. There we go, aligned just like that. You can see the first notch there is aligned with the timing marks there. And then you're gonna actually wanna tap that gear onto the shaft. So I'm gonna just tap this in here just by lifting the gear up with a wrench against the resistance of the spring. And then I'm just going to tap that down into the gear all the way down until it seats against the bushing. Just about seats against the bushing there. But you just need room to get your cotter pin back on the shifter shaft. That turns nice. There we go. You don't have to hit it very hard either. So now that I've got my shifter gear in, I can put in my shifter cam. I'm gonna wanna line up these two marks that I've made. So this mark on the shifter cam is gonna sit between the two marks I've got on the shifter gear. And it can only go in from one direction too, because this is just notched out here to fit around this casting here on the lid. And just try to get those to line up. And there we go, it's not too hard. Then you wanna just make sure your O-ring is on the shifter shaft. I'm gonna make sure that I oil my O-ring to get it onto the shaft a little bit. Okay, I got that popped on there. And I'm just gonna put a good layer of oil on the shaft. So the other seal will be on the opposite side from the shifter shaft. Just gonna start that in there. You have to tap it in a little bit. There we go. Before I tap it in all the way, I'm just going to double check my timing marks there, that they actually are lining up still, so make sure nothing moved. They look good. I'll just tap it in the rest of the way. All right, so I've got my shifter cam in and everything moves nice and smooth. So now I can just put my set screw in the little hole here. I want to do that up, not too tight, but tight enough. And make sure it's not sticking up. Okay, now I just put everything back in the vise because it's just a lot easier to work on it flat like this. So I'm gonna wanna put my gasket on here, and I actually cleaned up this surface. I just used actually like some really fine emery cloth just on a block, and I just cleaned this up very lightly. And then I also like countersunk these holes for the bolts a little bit just so that there's no high spots on them. All right, so the next step, you're gonna wanna have your shifter cam follower in place, because you're gonna want to have that just so that you can align everything properly when you go to put your ratcheting mechanism back together. So I've got my shifter cam follower here with the spring, good layer of grease on there, on the pin, as well as I'm going to put some on the spring too. Make sure it's just nice and greasy. So now I'm actually using my old retaining washer because it's gonna be like a 2-week wait for a new one. So that's okay though, because that's easy enough to replace later on when the new one comes in. Just for the sake of the video, I'm putting it together now with the old one, and I'll replace that later on, because you do want to replace those because they do get brittle over time when you've bent those tabs so many times. So you just want to tighten it just a little bit past snug. And normally, like these tabs, if this were a new washer, these would be slightly bent down to kind of just keep everything in place. And then one of these tabs you would bend up onto the nut itself just to lock it into place. I'm not going to do that right now because I want to replace that washer. So now for the next step, you're going to want to make sure that the shifter drum is positioned into first gear. So you want the cam follower to be positioned just behind this tab here on the shifter cam. So if you're looking at it from here, it's pretty easy to see which is first gear there. So now that it's positioned into first gear, now I'm ready to start putting my ratcheting mechanism back together. So starting with the gasket, I'm gonna put that in place. And then this is my shifter plate. So with my shifter cam in first gear, now I can align my adapter plate. So you want this notch in the bottom of your adapter plate here. You want that notch to actually be lining up with the first notch in the shifter shaft here. And it will do that when it is in first gear. It'll move a little tiny bit, but you want to just make sure that that's aligned. And then I'm just going to put a tiny little drop of blue Loctite just on the ends of these threads here. So a little teensy weensy bit. Make sure everything stays lined up, including the holes for the other 5 bolts that you're going to use to fasten this down. Okay, everything's lined up nicely. Snug that up, that's good. And then this gets tightened to 6 to 9 foot-pounds. I'm just gonna do this up to 7 foot-pounds, so it's just kind of somewhere in between there. All right, so tighten that screw up to 6 to 9 foot-pounds, which feels like a lot, but I suppose it isn't because that is the torque spec they give you. All right, so now that I've got my adapter plate snugged down, I'm just going to double check the alignment, and I'm just gonna do that by going through every gear, and it should be so that in each gear, the notch in the adapter plate will fall between 2 teeth on the shifter shaft here, other than in neutral where the first tooth is going to line up with that notch in the plate. So right now I'm in first, and you can see it's between those 2 teeth there. So if I go into neutral, then it should have that notch lined up with the first tooth on the gear, which it is. And then every gear after that should fall between 2 of the teeth on that gear. So this is neutral now. This is really hard to do. Okay, there's second. This is not very easy to do with hands, like this. Okay, third, and we just got fourth. Okay, and everything looks good. Perfect. Feels good too. It's shifting nicely. Okay, that's neutral again, now first. Perfect. All right, so now I'm gonna put the springs back into the adapter plate, and you do wanna coat your springs in grease. So I'm gonna give these a good coating of grease, because you want them being able to move freely in there, and you don't want anything going rusty either. So I'm just gonna give these a good bit of grease in here. It's gonna get messy. There we go, one spring in. Okay, now I'm ready to put my pawl carrier on here with the pawls and springs inside of it. First I want to grease this, and I also want to grease the bushing in the pawl carrier so that everything moves freely. And then when this gets put on there, the tab here on the pawl carrier is going to be positioned between these 2 springs here in the shifter plate. And another important thing is you guys can see these pins on the outside of the pawl carrier here. These pins go through all the way to where the pawl holders are here. And on the pawls, you've got a notch down the side of each pawl, and that notch actually lines up with the pins in these holes, and that's just to keep the pawls from spinning so that they stay in the proper orientation while you're shifting. I'm going to oil up my pawls here, I'm going to grease up my bushing and the shaft, and then I'm going to put this all together. Alright, so I've got my pawls in place in the carrier here. I've got them lined up with the pins. I've also greased the springs that go inside of the pawls, and now it's going to be a little bit tricky to put this on here. I've greased up my shaft and my bushing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hold these down. I'm going to compress them like this with my fingers and try to position this all on the plate as best I can. And these pawls should push down all the way if they're lined up correctly with those pins. This is going to be super duper tricky, man. This is definitely not a job that can be done with gloves on. Okay, so we'll get that tab in between the springs there. This is not easy to do. And then keep those paws decompressed until you actually are down on that gear. There we go. All right, so that is that. And at this stage, you do want to make sure that everything is still moving properly. So I'm just going to double check that that's all moving properly. Going through the gears and returning the way that it's meant to. Okay, so there we go, that's all operating nicely. That's back into first gear. Okay, you just want to double check that every step of the way, because you don't want to end up putting it all together and finding out that it doesn't work and then having to take it all apart again. That's never any fun. All right, now I can just put my pawl carrier cover back on, and I've got a gasket here, and the gasket's notched out to actually fit the plate. So you want to make sure these notches in the gasket and on the plate are lined up, and then your pawl carrier cover is actually notched also to line up with the notch on the plate there. And I'm going to give this a little bit of grease here too, just because this cover does move on there, so just give it a little bit of grease. Put my cover back on, line up those notches. All right, now I can put my screws in, and I'm just going to give these each a little drop of Loctite. And remember, you've got one screw that is a little bit shorter than the rest, and that's because it doesn't actually go into the cover itself, it goes into the nut. A little tiny bit of Loctite on each of these. So I'm just getting them all down to the bottom and then tighten them all up in a bit of a crisscross pattern. And the last one just goes on the nut. We'll just give that nut a tiny little bit of Loctite. Just the tiniest little bit off the end of the thing here. There's no washer for that. There's no room to even put a washer on there. So there we go. It's tightened up. All right, now I can put my dust cover on, and I've got a couple dowel pins on here. That just helps you to line up your dust cover. And same with the shifter arm here. That also rests on those dowel pins. So these also can just have the tiniest little drop of Loctite on them. And just do those up. And like, don't want to have them too tight either, because they are pretty small. And that's what the Loctite is for. Okay, now it's all tightened up, and I'm just going to check it again. It's in first, now neutral. Second, third, fourth. Okay, we'll go back into third, second, neutral, and first. Perfect. All moves nicely. So now I can put my neutral indicator on, and I'm just going to put a little bit of pipe sealant on the threads. And it does have like a little thin washer, gasket washer type thing on it too. And then that gets tightened 3 to 5 foot-pounds. And also the screws for holding on the pawl carrier cover, those are 20 to 24 inch-pounds. There we go, that is my ratchet top all ready to go on the transmission as soon as I have my transmission back together, which I'm just waiting to get a bushing back from the machine shop, and then that'll be ready to go. But now my top is ready to go, and yeah, it went pretty quickly and everything works pretty nicely, so I'm pretty happy with it. So that is it for this job, guys. It went pretty smoothly. I was a little bit nervous about it, but it's actually a pretty simple job when you get into it, and it always helps to watch a video first. That's what I think. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you found this helpful, or hopefully at least entertaining. And like always, guys, if you like what you see, or if you just like me, or even if you don't like me but you like my bikes, then like this video, comment, subscribe, share, and do all those things you guys do to keep me in business. And like always, my lovely YouTube people, I will catch y'all on the flip side. Peace. Oh, and almost forgot to mention, thank you for the shirt, Rainy Rider. I didn't cut it up too much. I just cut off the collar. But I've given everyone fair warning that if you send me t-shirts, I will probably cut the collar off unless it's a V-neck. And then I might still cut the collar off. Get out of there. I guess I could have done this off camera. Like, this stupid sleeve stop rolling down. You know what? I don't like to end it like that. Good enough.